What is true is that right through 2008, we at the Bank of England were arguing strongly that we needed to recapitalise the banking system, that it simply was not good enough just to lend a bit more. How many people do you know who said to you, just lend me $20 to get to the end of the week, I'll be able to repay you then? They couldn't do it. They kept having to roll over the loans. So more lending was not going to be the answer. At some point, recapitalisation was vital, and the UK was the first country to do it.
If you talk about that broader action that various nations, Western democracies took, particularly for the economy as opposed to the banks, quantitative easing, of course, was the groundbreaking move. To what extent was that coordinated internationally, and to what extent do you feel that you and Prime Minister Gordon Brown actually led the way on that and kind of showed the US the right action to take?
So I think from the beginning of the crisis, there was a lot of coordination, particularly among the central banks. In 2008, I think the UK did lead the way in recapitalising the banks, and the money which the Congress allocated for TARP, to buy distressed assets, ended up being used to recapitalise the banks, which was exactly what we had recommended. I think continental Europe was a lot slower in following through on that, and I think the US implemented the stress tests and recapitalisation in a very effective way.
This morning, the conversation Andrew had with Bernanke, Paulson, Geithner focused a lot on not being able to sell it to the public, the bailouts and the recapitalizations and the quantitative easing. Do you have regrets about how you sold this politically and how you sold it to the British people?
No, but I think the serious issue was that when there is a crisis, and this is the point that Tim Geithner and Ben Bernanke and Hank Paulson have always made, once you're in the throes of a crisis, you need to lend money to the banks to prevent a collapse of the entire banking system. I used to go to Parliament and say, we're doing this not to protect the banks, but to protect the economy from the banks. That was the key point. But in order to do that, it's better to be able to say to people, look, the banks have paid some insurance premium for every year without a crisis in order to have the right to borrow from the central bank in a crisis. And that's why we still have yet to put in place the policies which I think are needed to ensure that there is an insurance policy, and that both Congress and the public can see that the banks are paying in good times in order to have the privilege of borrowing in bad times.
Let's